couple little things before I introduce Stacy. If you have questions, probably the best way to do this, since we're muting everybody because you never know what background sounds could be coming in through somebody's mic, so we'll keep everybody muted until the end when there are questions. But even then, it'd probably be best if you went ahead and just typed in your question to everyone using chat, or just to Stacy, or to, well, I think everyone. Let's just have it typed, and everybody can see the questions. And then we will. So it's gonna be about 30 minutes of talk roughly, and then about 30 minutes of Q&A roughly. And so we're doing these once or twice a month on the first and third Monday of the month at noon. And so just and if anybody out there is interested in doing a talk, you can go to the UXConnect.wordpress.com, and that should be somewhere. You got to that site to get into this. So if you go there and you want to propose a presentation, that would be great. And we'd love to have you talk, give some experience, tell stories, whatever, and we can talk about the topic. So if there's nothing else that I've forgotten here, let's go ahead, and I'm going to introduce Stacy. We're really happy to have Stacy Surla here talking today. She's got a consulting background in information technology and research, and it spans more than 30 years, during which she found herself in interesting employment in a wide variety of corporate, nonprofit, and freelance settings. Stacy holds an MS in literature from American University, and she's senior manager at ICF International in the Interactive Division. And she serves on the editorial board of the Journal of Information Architecture. In addition, she was twice elected officer on the board of directors for the Information Architecture Institute, and serves as program chair for the 2005 IA Summit. Was deputy project manager of an applied anthropological research project in Cameroon, and co-founded the Rosebud Film and Video Festival. She also organized a neighborhood circus. So you can ask her about that if you'd like at the end, because that sounds pretty interesting. So I'm going to turn it over to Stacy.
Hi, everybody. Before I get started, let me ask a logistic question. I'm on my headphone, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. So maybe David, you should answer the question for everybody. Am I clear enough, or do you need me to be clearer than this?
I think you're pretty clear. I'm hearing you pretty well from where I am.
Okay, good.
See, there's a little hand raise thing at the end, at the bottom of the participants list. If you can pull up the participants list, everybody, if you're, let's just say if you're not hearing Stacy well, hold up your hand. Otherwise, we'll assume everything's okay.
Yeah, and somebody shout out to me, because I'm actually not looking at the WebEx, I'm looking at my slide deck. So just let me know, and if necessary, I'll jump right onto the just direct phone. So,
sounds pretty good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me get started. I'm going to basically tell stories today. This is not a highly PowerPointy presentation. You'll just be hearing me talk for the most part. Okay. So just warn you ahead of time, if you're expecting lots of transitions, you're not going to see a lot of that. So let's get started. Okay, this is Eddie James. He's the owner of a small IA and user research company in Jacksonville, Florida. Eddie spoke with me about his business, his practice, and his work-life balance from poolside at his home office a few weeks ago. I caught up with Eddie at the IA Summit earlier this year, and his story really inspired me. I'm conducting this research project called A Day in the Life of an Information Architect. I'm talking with people who I think are doing interesting things in interesting ways in the face of big challenges. With Eddie, I wanted to learn more about how he crafted a career that lets him do contradictory things, how he went from being an NE at a large corporation to running his own one-man consultancy, like working 12-hour days, getting on a plane to spend time at a client site, but also being able to take a week off or a month off to hang off at the beach. Like sticking to the role of a consultant while also working with his clients, though he were on their staff. Like moving from a metropolitan area to rural Central Florida, where there was no user experience community, and he had no contacts, and then getting as much work as he could handle immediately. So through that interview and the others I'm going to talk about, I was looking for two sorts of insights. The first is kind of practical and down to earth. I asked people to tell me what they do. Questions like, what sorts of things does your company deliver? Do you manage staff? How much hands-on IA do you do? How much business development are you responsible for? What skills do you use? How do your city, country, and economy impact your opportunities? I was motivated by the idea of teasing out the magic combination of skills, circumstances, and approach that would lead to a successful IA career. The second sort of insight that I was looking for was kind of conceptual. Each person who I asked for an interview is doing a splendid job with their career, in my view. I wanted to find out who this person was being. I wanted to understand who you have to be to do that. Maybe that sounds airy-fairy, but it's something substantial. What is the career way that enables people, that will enable us to craft a worthwhile career story? I looked for the conceptual insight through asking those practical questions. Tell me the story of how you arrived at where you are, and walk me through a typical day. I've learned more in a half dozen interviews so far than we can cover here in 30 minutes. I'll share with you some of the case studies and offer a couple of takeaways. But my key finding so far is this. It's all about approach, the journey, the path, the way. Here's what I keep seeing. When you know something about yourself, when you have the nerve to be true to that knowledge, and you can stay centered on what's of core importance to you, that will drive your approach. You'll use your strengths, deal with your weaknesses, manage your particular circumstances. When you roll like that, you have surprising power to make things work for yourself and others. As Kenneth Bull says, to make parts of the world better and create personal value for other people. My goal over the next year and more is to interview many more people and present their stories in a useful form. I look forward to your comments and your questions today. I'm hoping they'll help shape my project. So right now, let me go a little further into some of the case studies I've been gathering. And after that, I want to touch briefly on the employment outlook for IA. Okay, back to Eddie. Quote, I'm incredibly lazy, so I don't do a lot of marketing, which will bite me in the butt someday. I need to devote time to reaching out. This is common among UX people. We're busy, so ongoing marketing and research goes by the wayside sometimes. There may be some truth to this, but here's Eddie's description of how he launched his business. I thought if I stayed in Philadelphia, it would have been easier. I had connections. I knew everyone. In Florida, user experience is not common. I knew no one and thought it would be difficult, but I found it was the reverse. The need was great. I talked to people and got work immediately. You don't have to be in San Francisco. Even if there aren't necessarily jobs, that doesn't mean there's not work. I started a meetup, UX Orlando. I thought it would be just me sitting at Panera alone at the table. But there are 180 people in the meetup. Product owners, entrepreneurs, people wanting to see about UX. I would recommend doing that to anybody who's where there isn't a group. It's shocking who will jump on board. It's helpful knowing these people. They know who I am and got the word out. I got a call 3 days after I started the group. So here are some of the things I learned in this conversation. Eddie is basically a one-man shop. As such, he's high-level and detail-oriented at the same time. But he also brings on people to do specific jobs. For instance, he has an Hispanic market project, so he brought someone in who understands marketing and speaks Spanish. He's often asked to advise, be a resource to his clients that they can access, be on calls with them, and become a subject matter expert on their teams. In each of his sequence of jobs, Eddie seemed to discover and practice additional dimensions of his work. For instance, he did interaction design for Cosmo.com, which was an e-commerce startup that delivered local goods instantly to people by bike messenger. He had to design more than the website. he had to design warehouse layout. He had to design a better bike bag so ice cream wouldn't melt. Figure out how to card customers for alcohol deliveries. In other words, service design. In similar ways, he's learned enterprise IA, designing for financial services, and mobile. A typical day for Eddie might go like this. He wakes up at 7:30. He sleeps with his iPad and his smartphone, so he checks email before he gets out of bed, maybe responding to clients in England or Australia. When he gets downstairs, he's at work. Eddie's home and office are in a large house built in the 1800s. The family room is the dedicated office. There's a fireplace, 2 desks, the second one for whomever might be working with him, a meeting space, a love seat and chairs, and a huge whiteboard. Eddie works from this office 75% of the time and encourages his clients to pull him onto client site at least 25% of the time. He tries to keep only 1 or 2 projects going at a time, plus a retainer project. Every day can be different. It's not 9 to 5. Sometimes clients need him to turn things around overnight. Sometimes he takes the day to get other errands done or to go to the beach. He likes the flexibility. One key thing to making this work is that he's always clear with his clients on his conditions. For instance, his first client wanted him full-time, even double-time, and wanted him 100% on site. He said no, and they said fine. According to Eddie, you have to negotiate. Even when they make a demand, it doesn't mean it's a deal breaker. Miyoko Kawachi is a communications manager for a design firm in Tokyo called Content Inc. She does internal communications, media relations, and marketing. She coordinates IA and UX events. She writes articles for the in-house magazine and has her own column where she talks about IA and UX events. For instance, conferences she's attended overseas or workshops the company has held in cities outside Tokyo. She also sometimes works as an assistant to her boss, Atsushi Hasegawa, who's a well-known IA speaker and author. Interestingly, Miyoko is also a personal stylist. She says, I look at fashion as a communication tool. Each item and detail have metadata and context. Fashion is very interesting from an IA point of view. How you wear has something to do with your user experience, the messages people get from you. Perhaps this line of thinking could lead to a new pattern language. I hope I can describe more about it, maybe at an IA summit in the future. In a similar thread to Eddie's career, Miyoko has made observations about her work experiences and discovered the core values. This has guided her decision-making as she went along. Miyoko happened to start her career in the PR sector. In the Japanese hiring culture, people apply for a company, not a position. After college, Miyoko joined Japan's leading telecom company, and she found herself assigned to the public relations office. There she edited the in-house magazine, assisted with media relations, and worked on the corporate website. After several years, she left to get a BA in multimedia communications at a university in Iowa. At the university, she studied computer graphics and website design. Miyoko remarked that the curriculum was practical, not conceptual. It emphasized how to use graphic software. She discovered that her interest was not on visual design, but on invisible structures, like website structure, navigation, and the relationship among content objects. But as she said, I didn't know the term IA at that time, so I couldn't find my way into the appropriate program. Back in Tokyo, she registered with a temporary staffing agency and worked on a number of editorial and web design projects. Then she was assigned to Toyota and was part of the startup team on the G-Book project. This groundbreaking telematics system provides interactive services between car owners and dealers via an onboard terminal. It was interesting cross-channel service design work. Miyoko did screen transitions and structures for the G-Book device and enterprise-level work across the Toyota and Lexus websites, still not knowing that people call this information architecture. The hours were demanding and the schedule was intense. The development and implementation teams delivered features, but without user research or appropriate design processes. Telematics was a challenging and experimental concept, but Mayoko still didn't feel enough was being done to think about users. She began to feel very guilty about it, so she quit. Mayoko began to explore what she calls the right way to do it. She researched IA and UX design for over half a year. Then she came back to work at a company called Loftworks. This is an eBay-like marketplace to connect creatives with clients. One of the shareholders is Joey Ito, director of the MIT Media Lab in Massachusetts. At Loftworks, Mayoko did wireframes and structures. While there, she met Atsushi, her present boss. She said, "I finally arrived at the truth. I felt that content uses an appropriate design process in IA and UX, so I decided to join." She negotiated her schedule before joining content. She wanted to pace down and achieve a balance between personal and work life. So her core work schedule is 4 days a week. On a typical morning, she might be working with her husband at home on his business management company. At 1 p.m., she's at the office. Her regular end time is 6 p.m., so she usually works till 8 o'clock or later. At work or at home, she's always online on Facebook, Salesforce, Yahoo Messenger, Skype, and so on. Many of her coworkers work until very late at night, and people message her constantly. For instance, Atsushi will share his ideas and questions with Mayoko as soon as a thought comes to his mind, and she'll respond back. Talking about opportunities and challenges, Mayoko says that working as an IA or UX designer is easier in Tokyo than in other cities in Japan. Tokyo is the headquarters of major companies. Many of them understand the importance of IA and UX and spend money on user experience. This is not necessarily so in local cities. Mayoko said, "Every time I go to the IA Summit, I'm surprised at the level of discussion. I can assume that people who work in New York, Los Angeles, or San Francisco can have a high level of discussion. It's just like Tokyo. It should be easier to practice IA in these big cities because there are lots of opportunities. But at the IA Summit, people who come from local cities still have enough skills, knowledge, and experience to practice IA. It doesn't matter where they come from. In Japan, we can't do that. I feel there is a deep information gap between Tokyo and local cities. They want to learn something. They seem to hesitate to offer ideas or topics or talk about what's going on. Probably it's because they don't have enough opportunity to practice IA themselves." Oh, sorry, I'm off. I muted myself. Okay. Matthew Milan is the design leader at Normative, a 20-person design studio in Toronto he began 5 years ago with his business partner, John Tremandy. They created the company as a means to explore things they want to learn and things they want to do, under the role of a client-focused organization. Normative builds enterprise software to drive organizational change. IA is a strong thread through what they do. They invest in IAs with classic skills like library science and computer science. And they also hire people with a systems background, including soft sciences like economics. As Matthew says, if we have these different definitions of what IA might be, we can get a good perspective over the years of what it should be. When Matthew graduated from high school, he planned to have a serious career in the ski industry. At that time, ski area design was a huge growth industry and involved a lot of different skills like environmental assessment, planning, and engineering. He got into a university in Toronto that was one of 2 schools in the world that taught ski area design. While he was there, however, the regulatory environment changed. So by the time he graduated, there were no jobs. So he went back to school. He still wanted to do something that involved computer science, environmental science, design, and engineering. He found that the software tools they had to work with were hard to use. The interfaces were bad, and he wondered why that was so. The tools themselves were basic, while the scope of the problems to be solved were large. After some research, he decided to study this field. He said, "I went to the library and got The Lunatics Are Running the Asylum. I read Victor Lombardi's post on traditional architects versus information architects. I cold called anyone with a background in the field. For instance, Lou Rosenfeld, and said, "You don't know me, but I have a whole bunch of questions." Matthew ended up getting an interdisciplinary graduate degree in human factors, information sciences, and environmental planning. Matthew describes his typical day this way. At 6:30 a.m., my two daughters come in and wake me up. I hang with the family for 20 minutes, put on my running shoes, and run 5 kilometers to work 365 days a year. I have a shower, and I'm at my desk at 8:30. I deal with emails around high-level client questions. At 9:30, I chat with my business partner and maybe other senior leadership. We run on a pod-based model. We reconfigure 2 to 5 person teams based on the project and can combine pods for larger projects. People work on at least 2 projects at a time by design to have multiple problems to solve and multiple perspectives at a time. There are no account managers or project managers. These functions are owned by the pods. There's no broken telephone at our business. The client can talk directly to the designer, IA, and engineer. Often clients come in to work with the system teams, with the design teams. We work on live prototypes and do rich mapping and sketching. We go straight to HTML or iOS prototypes and do graphic design as early as possible. I might be hanging out with clients or a team of folks. The conversations are fluid, and there's a lot of trust with clients on the team, and a lot of team member autonomy. I'm demanding on outcomes, not on how the work gets done. At 5 o'clock, I get in my running shoes and run home. At 10:30, I check email and fire off emails. It's less frantic than it sounds because we're used to it. Intensity is part of our culture. We work hard but rarely work late. We limit people working past 6 p.m. Jason is a design consultant who owns his own business. His project work includes research, strategy, and design, and he also does corporate training. He works mostly on large projects with fairly big teams, with multiple phases and a high degree of complexity. So his first step is to design the process that will be the creative journey over the next few weeks or months. Jason's consultancy is only one aspect of his work. Equally important are his academic and community dimensions. He teaches a course in UX design to second-year undergraduates at the University of Johannesburg. He conducts research into the intersection between open problems and information architecture. He sees IA as a powerful tool to help people solve open problems, also known as wicked problems or indeterminate problems. He publishes with his research partner, Terence Fenn, through the University of Johannesburg. He and Terence are also writing a business case to start a design center for open problems. Jason speaks at conferences around the world and publishes articles. On the community side, he began the South Africa Experience Forum in 2006. He works with the IA Institute as an advisor to the board. He's chaired their research grants program and participates in the mentoring program. A typical day finds him up early, exercising, having a coffee, and then at his desk between 8 and 9 a.m. He sits at the dining room table with papers spread out all around. He's got design books in the library at arm's reach. He stays there and stops at 5 or 6 o'clock. He'll carry on working at night, but by 5 or 6, he likes to know how much he's billing. Jason says, you have to be adaptable. You have to be able to work in any environment. Forget the modern idea of the artist who works in a space and has divine inspiration. You have to be able to sit client-side in a horrible, stagnant environment and deliver the goods. Equally important, it's very useful to know yourself soon. Some people work effectively in a hierarchical situation and thrive in a bank. Others thrive in an agency environment. Some are lone wolfish and can work alone. You need to be disciplined. People think working at home in their studio must be great. You can muck off in the middle of the day, start late, and so on. Not so. According to Jason, user experience in South Africa is not doing well. He says, there remain only a handful of senior UX people and true UX agencies in South Africa, and we need more. A lot of people are coming back, having gained experience abroad, and hopefully more will come back. The fields of IA and UX are desperate for skilled new entrants. Some of the schools and universities are responding, but more need to come on board. Clients are getting smart on the topic and are often ahead of agencies claiming to do UX. Many of the agencies are just offering sitemaps and wireframes. To help clients, we need standards and better industry organization. A professional body of some kind would help. IA and UX are heavily bound up in innovation, driven by user-centered methods. The commitment to this path by clients is often more than they realize. Designing a corporate website, for instance, using user-centered methods usually has far-reaching implications that influence organizational culture, processes, marketing, and other channels. So it's important for both service providers and clients to pay more than lip service to design and innovation. When asked for his advice on people considering a job in IA and UX design, Jason offers the following. Work on as many projects as possible from as diverse sectors as possible. Get a mentor as soon as possible and have as many as possible in your career. Get experience in an agency, client side, and working for yourself. Work in different social, political, and cultural contexts. Learn as much as possible from other fields of design. Read voraciously about the topic. Develop your business acumen. Be uncompromisingly ambitious. Really love doing it as an end in itself, or try something else. All right, I'm going to take a few minutes now to point you to some resources that you might find valuable. Every year, the IA Institute carries out a salary survey about compensation, daily work habits, and demographics of information architects. The results from the 2012 survey and trends from previous years show that the employment outlook is good overall and looking better. My own experience as a hiring manager for a large consulting firm tells me the same thing. Here are some highlights from the latest IAI survey. The global median salary for an information architect is about $95 US per year, $95,000 US per year, which is a $6,000 per year increase over 2011. The median freelance rate is $95 an hour, which is a $5 an hour increase from the previous year. By region, the highest median salaries are in Australia and the Pacific Rim at $125,000 US dollars per year. The median in the U.S. is $105,000. Canada, $85,000. The United Kingdom, $55,000. South America, $35,000. Asia, except India, $25,000. India, it's $15,000 per year. The highest paying organizations include game developers, financial services, and retail e-commerce. The next highest paying are consulting firms and freelancing. The lowest paying categories are educational institutions with a median of $75,000 per year and the government at $65,000 per year. These are just a few of the findings. I suggest you read through the summary page on the IA Institute site and download the report. All right, I thought you might want to get a little bit of advice on how to get a job. So on this topic, the best quick advice I can give you is to attend one of Russ Unger's career workshops. Russ offers these as half-day events at the IA Summit and probably in other venues. The latest one was delivered by Amanda Schoenfeld and Russ at the IA Summit in 2013. Or, if you don't have the opportunity to do that, work your way through the slide deck. It's absolutely practical advice aimed at IA and UX professionals. Russ talks about preparing for your job search, networking, getting your resume and portfolio into shape, interviewing and follow-up, and quitting your current job. In summary, let me offer you a few ideas. Get to know yourself. Learn your own core values. Use your self-knowledge to guide your career choices and your focus. Even when there are no jobs, there is work. You have to negotiate for what you want and need. Solid skills are important, but those are just a start. Building strong relationships with your clients, thinking strategically, and developing domain expertise will take you to the next level. Our electronic devices can connect us to work at all times, but staying always on versus taking downtime is a matter of choice, and you can make either mode work. People have different levels of comfort with different organizational settings and situations, so find what works for you. And important, don't settle for being locked in somewhere that doesn't work for you. Okay, once again, this project is part of an ongoing exploration of the context for IA in development and practice, and I'd be interested to hear your comments and your questions. I'm going to pull up a slide that includes references, so you can look at those. And I'm going to now go back. Let me see if you can still see the slide. Hopefully, because I'm going to go back to the WebEx now. Okay, David, are you on?
I am, yes. And
okay.
so
I'm actually trying to pull up the WebEx app. Okay. I'm getting it. So let me see. I'm now looking to see how I can see what people have asked, what questions they've asked.
Yeah, I think up at the top you might see, if you go to the top of your screen, there's a green little bar, maybe.
Yeah, I see chat. Okay, maybe the people haven't asked questions yet. I see one.
I did. I posted one. And also, there's another one from, is it Noreen Weisel? Yeah. We are collecting salary data now for the 2013 survey if you'd like to participate. So anybody out there right now, you could go to the IAI site and start. And Noreen, is that something that they can just do through the site, or do they need to contact you? And while she may be putting that in, I'd like to say thank you for this presentation, Stacy. This has been pretty informative. I like to see these kind of case studies and the results of interviews like this to kind of get a feel for some dimensions of the profession that we haven't really thought of. I posted a question in the chat, but I'm going to read some other people before we get to that. So Noreen says, yes, there is a link on the homepage that you can use the link to the survey that Stacy put on her slide. So, and then Dao Zhang asks, how does an IA normally learn new design and research skills?
Okay, I can talk to that a little bit. It doesn't. A lot depends on what your setting is, where you're working, what the opportunities are. There's a body of knowledge that everybody should take advantage of on how to conduct research. And there's a pretty well-established set of great tools that people use to do participant research, and I could maybe find some resources and post those. Let me make a note to myself. That would be good to be able to point everybody to. And learning design skills is similar. What I've heard from people as I talk to people doing this in all sorts of different settings is it kind of depends. I mean, in some places you'll have the opportunity to join sort of broader UX communities of practice, and that's always a great place to go, where you can listen to people lecture about, share case studies or whatever about what they're working on, and share what their design practices are and what they suggest. So being in an ongoing conversation is probably, that's what I'm trying to say. Get yourself into an ongoing conversation. If you can get into a community of practice, that's great. It could be an online one, or there might be one in your area. Try to get to conferences or even, small workshops or whatever, so you can, be with other people basically. There are, of course, courses you can take, and you can get formal about it, but at least make sure that you're talking with other folks who do what you're interested in, and you can learn from them so much. It's been super valuable for so many people. There's another question. Or do you want to moderate? David, you can moderate. That's fine.
No, go ahead. If you want to read down, that's fine too.
I finally
I wasn't sure whether you could see the chat window, but go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So Jason is asking, what if consulting is not an option? Do you mean freelancing, or you can reply, but you might mean that there's not really some scope for freelance work, or it might be that you're asking, well, I don't know, maybe organizations that are hiring IAs where you are not consulting firms, they're maybe corporations where you're working interior to the corporation versus for other people. So I'm not quite sure what you're asking about here. I would say that, or here, for somebody that's very junior. Okay, so let's say you're in a situation, you could apply this in different settings. Let's say you're in a company where you're in a junior role, maybe you're in a user experience role or something, in publishing or in the web setting or someplace, but you're not able to, people aren't calling you an IA, you don't really see what the path is forward. And that's interesting, because I've been wondering if that's still the case. That certainly was the case 10 years or more ago. People were discovering that they were IAs in settings where nobody was an IA, nobody was talking about IA or user experience. They just weren't framing it that way. And it was hard and lonely work to figure out, how do I actually do my job? What am I? Who am I? And so a couple of things, again, I say communities of practice are super important. If you can get involved with other people who are doing things like what you're doing, even outside work, that gives you the opportunity to join in on projects. You can build up your portfolio. So that's a way to move forward. If you can demonstrate that you're doing this work somewhere, then your own boss can listen to you when you're saying, look, I'm doing this IA work, or here's this perspective I want to bring to this project that we're doing. We need to consider the user. We need to organize the information in a certain way, and here's the methods for doing it. So as you educate yourself, as you get the collective, wisdom behind you, it gives you something to work with in whatever situation you're in to make more progress, to learn more for yourself, and to also advance yourself in your company, and to make a difference in your company or whatever setting you're in, to actually help evolve them and mature them in the UX domain. Okay, a question from April O'Malley is, are there commonalities about the types of tasks that these folks are doing from day to day? These people that I talked about and other people that I interviewed, I wasn't able to really share the stories of everybody that I've talked to so far. Some of the commonalities that I'm seeing are, there are some core IA skills, being able to organize information, basically. And there's tools that people use that we've come to use, we call them deliverables or work products, right, that everybody kind of needs to know how to do. So you need to be able to describe using wireframes, or you need to be able to describe interactions through process flows and through other means. You need to be able to talk about content, and we've got tools like different kinds of content mapping tools and things of that nature, where we can describe content and the relationships among content. And there are research tools that we use and certain forms for delivering the results of those. So they're kind of hands-on tasks that everybody pretty much does or has done. And jumping up sort of high level, one thing that I was seeing that weren't really tasks, but sort of this idea I have, this way of working, this sort of way of thinking, kind of strategic maybe, way of thinking. I saw that in all these different amazing ways, and all these people that I talked to, I just kept seeing that dimension of doing more than just sitting down and working through a task, but like thinking, looking a little bit higher and thinking about, hey, what does my client need? Given that we have all these tasks, what's really going on here? And then being able to apply IA thinking to help solve bigger problems. in the case of Naoko, for instance, and not only she, but a lot of people who I invited to talk to me said, well, I'm not really an IA, but, well, let's hear, what have you been doing, and how do you use IA? How do you use it to build your career? Or how do you use it, or how does it shape what you do now? And I really kept seeing all these people using these sort of IA skills that we learn, hands-on, sit down at your desk skills, and applying them in different ways. I mean, Naoko applying this thinking to her exploration of fashion, for instance, as a language, and just Eddie talking about how indispensable he is. And he works with his clients, the value he brings to their conversations. It's more than just being a business analyst, who you might think might be able to sit in on calls or, sort of a PM or something who can help manage calls. No, it's thinking. It's a way of thinking that they bring. So that's what comes to my head when I try to answer your question. Let's see, we have one from Fernando, which is, how does one sell IA to a company that does not know what information architecture is? It's a heroic task, and it's a worthwhile task, and it's something that plays out over and over again. It will play out through your career over and over again unless some major transformation takes place. Suddenly people get it. So yeah, first you need to recognize and embrace and not be all upset about the fact that you will need to sell information architecture over and over to your teammates, to your broader team, to your work group, to your company, to your prospective clients. I think one way to do that is to think about how to translate what you're doing into terms that your audience can understand. So if we look at it from a team level, if you're working with myself, I happen to be working currently within a huge team, and it's development oriented, it's an engineering oriented team. So what I do is I describe what the user experience team does in terms that help them understand, it helps their bottom line. Now, if we can describe, here's the interface, then the developers don't have to figure out what is the interface. they can develop. They don't have to figure those things out. They don't have to figure out what the content of the error messages are. We can do that for them. So I couch it in terms of how it helps them, and they really appreciate it. It's actually at the high value. Within a company or to a client who you're trying to sell on taking an approach, they may not know what it is. They may have considerations that, that user experience stuff just adds time. It's just color and design. They don't get it, right? You have to think about how to break down in terms that how it helps them solve a particular problem. So, for instance, the return on their investment. You think about the content part of it of their site, and you can say, look, if people can't understand how to quickly get, or the pure IA, so the navigational part of it, if people can't get, people cannot, when they land on your homepage and they can't figure out how to get to the, to the action page where they're going to make a transaction. That means you're going to lose people. And then you can say, well, look, and here's how we can make it better, and here we have tools for doing that. So you have to kind of, basically what I'm trying to say is you have to translate into language that the people you're talking to can understand. Let's see. Innocent asked this question, what project did you do in Cameroon, and how's the market for IA there? What a great question. I was working in the 80s in Cameroon, and I was working on an applied anthropological research project that was kind of a service design project, if I kind of break it apart now and think about it in terms that I didn't think about then. Really was helping these Western development workers understand what was going on with the small farmers. They were working on, trying to get technologies adopted and things like that, all kinds of different things, agriculture, credit, all kinds of really interesting things, small livestock, and just sort of like understanding how they all work together, and then trying to come up with insights about how to make that process work better, basically. It was contextual inquiry. The market for information architecture there is there. It would have to be highly translated, though. Websites in Cameroon, I found them to be very hugely graphic heavy, and bandwidth is low, so it's hard to load those pages. That doesn't really make sense. Telecom has been, a huge IT strength in Cameroon. Everybody's on their phone. Not that many people have smartphones, but people have their text phones. I think there are huge opportunities for using mobile to facilitate different kinds of things. I noticed, and I know this because I actually talked to one of my research associates not too long ago, who is in Cameroon, and he teaches school there. And I was pumping him for info about this. Internet cafes are few and far between, and so people will need to get on a bus and go a couple of hours to get to the nearest internet cafe. But then you do that, and people do use those tools. So I think there's an exciting opportunity there. I think mobile is a big part of that. So I just need people to go in and kind of figure out how to make it work using the tools that are available. And I guess we just have a couple more minutes. Dr. Robbins just sent out a link. I have to look what that is. Looks interesting.
Yeah, I just put okay, so I have my own take on when I hear, you talk about, say, some of the different things that people have said. I was looking for commonalities among them, and some of it seemed like life-work balance and exercise and things like this to make themselves more effective, or it allows themselves to be more effective. Now, that may not work for everyone, but I know it helps me. If I didn't go and work out, I don't think anyone here would want to work with me at all, among the remaining ones who actually do want to work with me. So, but what I'm trying to, what I was looking there, and so then there was a book that I had read recently called Spark, which actually looks at the science behind how some form of exercise can help people be more effective. So this is, I'm not saying this was the main point of what you were saying today, but it just struck me that some of these things were coming through. And so I provided a link to that book.
Thank you for that. I like that very much, and I have to second what you say. I myself started to get into regular exercise about a year ago, and I can't tell you the difference it makes to being able to take things in stride and work. The more stressful and high pressure it gets at work, the more projects it feels like I'm juggling. You exercise, and it puts things into perspective, and it makes you strong enough to keep going on. I don't know. It's really great. I really think that's a very good idea. And I didn't. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No. I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, it's just that I don't believe that we can solve problems all the time by consciously working them, and that getting away from them from time to time, whether it's through exercise or reading a novel or doing something that you really enjoy doing, allows your brain to either relax and work on things. And in a creative field like IA or UX, I think it's really critical that you actually stop doing it for a while, and almost every day, and then move. Then you can come back fresh, because actually doing things consciously is not always the best approach to finishing a job or working on a problem. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
And here's something else that I think spins off of that. One of the takeaways that I shared with everyone, and I shared it because it really resonated with me personally, was this thing about being always wired versus not being always wired. And that was something that I felt like I always had to do. And in fact, in some corporate settings, it's almost a kind of one-upsmanship thing. How late at night did so-and-so respond to my email? Who's doing work into what wee hours of the night? Who's on vacation in this world and is still on phone, still on conference call? And so I recently made a decision to do such crazy things as stop, on the weekend, turn off my email from work. Think about that. at a certain hour at night, I will stop pulling email from work. And it's almost painful to do that. But then on the other hand, it's like, wow, now I'm resting. I'm actually resting and recovering, and then, hey, the email is still there tomorrow morning. And who cares if I'm not the latest person at night answering emails? I mean, who cares about that anyway? So that's a good one. Let's see. There's one other. I'm going to respond to one other one here from Hernando, which says there seems to be quite a bit of overlap between IA, account planners, creative directors, and the the UI UX designers. What's your experience interacting with people in these fields, both in agency settings and on contract jobs? Thank you for this question. It's one of it's one of the questions that's embedded in my research plan, to really specifically pull out from people, what other disciplines do you work with? What's your overlap there? And there's so much to dig into that I didn't highlight it really very much. At least I probably wound up doing that, but I kind of didn't dig into it in my analysis and synthesis yet. And the reason why is because there's so much overlap that it needs a lot of attention. For instance, IAs can feel like, the experience of becoming an IA includes the experience of kind of rediscovering things that other disciplines have discovered and perhaps perfected, right, in their own way. Yet at the same time, from an IA point of view, reinventing it, taking a new take on it, which I think is highly valuable. I mean, for instance, there's multi-channel service design. I mean, we talk about it that way. Does that mean it's existed in many forms for, millennial, let's say, a long time. But some things that marketing does are things that IAs think about and do, et cetera. But they're different fields and they do it differently. It doesn't mean that, I don't know, how do I want to put it? They're not mutually exclusive. They're not, having one doesn't mean invalidate the other. But there's a lot to think about, and I don't really know enough about it to talk intelligently about, what the overlaps are, and what the sort of connections are. I think there's a lot there, and I want to figure out more. But in day-to-day life, yes, you interact with people who are in these different areas. Jason Hobbs, for instance, talked about one thing, and I didn't highlight this. But usually it's he'll be hired to come into a project by one of those domains, so one of those departments. Marketing might hire him to come in, for instance. And so they think he's doing marketing for them. But here's IT over here, and they're working tons of stuff that relates to what he's doing. If they're not brought into the conversation early, if they're not stakeholders in the project, then you're missing lots of opportunities. You're missing insights, and also your insights don't necessarily get shared out to all the people who can benefit from hearing. So, yeah, there's lots of overlap, and there are some tricky things about connecting those things. So it's a very rich area.
Well, I just want to, thank you. We have actually the opening unit in the introductory course, the first introductory course we have in our UX program is an assignment to kind of try to tease out the differences and similarities between several of these disciplines that were named in that question, and others as well. So I think it's important to try to figure out where you are, but it's so complicated and there's so much overlap that there's really no hard and fast answers to those things. But I'd also like to thank you, Stacy. These were great, and the participants. These are great questions, great answers, and really good presentation. And again, if anybody is interested in looking at this afterwards, tell your friends about this as well. We have enough recording at the UXConnect website, and then our next presentation will be in the first Monday of October, and I can't remember the date, but it's on the site. So again, thank you, Stacy, and there's a big round of applause that you can't hear, but I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay. Well, thanks, everyone. See you next month.